Hey everybody, it is Sunday morning and I just realized it has been a long time since I've done an around the world update, so that is exactly what we're going to do right now. Very impromptu, so not really sure what we're going to find as we go around from tank to tank. We may find some unexpected treasures, we may find some dead fish, who knows, we'll find out as we go. So we're going to start at my waterfall tank, and not a whole lot going on here. I haven't done anything personally to it in several days. I topped it off a few days ago, but that's about it. I guess the only thing we really can talk about is the plant growth, which I'm starting to see a little bit of recovery on my temple plant right here. This is actually starting to grow and look pretty good. So that temple plant I still hanging on. I've had that for years and years. I thought it all died off, but that one little piece is still hanging in there. Of course, the Java moss that I threw in there is all attached to these rocks now and growing all through here. That looks really good. You can see the Java moss growing on the backing there. So that all looks good. I've got actually some new growth coming out on that water sprite that's floating in that upper basin. My dead nettles are looking good. These Rex begonia are pretty much ready to go upstairs and outside for the year. It's warm enough now that I don't think we're going to get too much more cold weather, and you can see how ridiculously leggy they are. I mean, they're planted all the way down here in this pot, and you don't even get leaves on them until you're up here. So they're not in a very suitable place for them to live. We have another one right here too. It's a little bit better, but it just gets a little closer to the light, that's all. My arrowhead plant up there, on the other hand, is growing like gangbusters. That thing's doing crazy good, and it's mostly just because of this really bright LED that's either too much light for some of the plants or it gives a nice natural sunlight to the others. As far as what's going on in the tank, water looks a little cloudy today, and I'm not sure why. I did do a big top off yesterday, and I know I disturbed all the mulm and everything in the bottom, and so I'm beginning to suspect that mulm might have something to do with the nitrogen cycle. And when I disturb it and get it all messed around and mucked up, I always seem to get cloudy water for a few days. And it's not cloudy like the kind of cloudy you get with detritus and, you know, mulm and stuff swirling around in the water. This is cloudy like a little bacterial bloom kind of cloudy. And I just went through a few week period of this tank being a little clouded up not long ago, and it just cleared itself out naturally, which I'm assuming it's going to do again this time. I'm just not really sure what's going on, why it keeps clouding up like this, and it's only after I do like a large top off or a water change, so there's got to be some sort of disruption going on. I just haven't put my brain power to it long enough to really sort it out yet. I'm not that concerned about it. It's not really an issue, other than, you know, it doesn't look particularly nice. My little foot tank here, if you look at this, that is all mulm. And so I really need to get in there and clean this out. And that depth of mulm goes all the way from one side of the tank to the other. You can see that black thing in the back is the pump, and it's almost buried in mulm. There's a little open area in front of it where, you know, the water's being drawn in, and that kind of keeps the mulm clear there. But otherwise, we've got several inches of mulm in this tank to get cleared out. And of course you can see I got all the growth and everything going on the rocks. So that's about all that's happening with the whole waterfall tank system. And so we will now get all these lights turned out so we don't have a huge amount of glare on all the other tanks as we go around the room. That was my big LED. This is just a simple floodlight. It's the same kind of floodlights I use in all my tanks. I've been talking about them a lot lately. I just use one of them in a little gooseneck fixture I have clipped to my ceiling, and then that provides light to these higher plants where the big LED doesn't really shine that high up. That's faced more downward. So moving on to my 29 miscellaneous here. Haven't done any work in this tank in a couple of weeks. I did just top it off the other day, and the last time I wiped the glass down in this tank was a couple weeks ago when I did the water change, and I found almost nothing on the front glass. So this tank doesn't have a ton of lighting in it. It's got the original little LEDs that came with the hood fixture, and they've been in there for probably about 10 years now, so whatever intensity they had when they were new is far, far fallen off by now. But the tank still looks nice enough if you can avoid seeing all the glare from the other tanks. Here, let me turn that one final light off that I missed. That'll cut back on that glare a little bit more. So nothing really new going on in here. Still got my angelfish, still looking gorgeous. He's not getting very big, which makes me happy. This is going to probably be able to spend its whole life in this 29. It definitely seems like whatever initial rapid growth it was having is slowed down, and we're getting into more of its adult size. It'll still fill in more, but we're probably looking at about how big that's going to be total. It's just not going to be a really big angelfish, and that's good because this is only a 29-gallon tank, and if it got too big it would not be able to fit in there. Case in point, if we move over here to my 55-gallon gourami tank, you almost think I should call this the angelfish tank with that angelfish. That is probably, it's one of my two most stunning angels. If you're familiar with my channel, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're not, I have another one that's just like this in another tank, and they are both mixed angelfish, PetSmart, you know, $5 angelfish that grew up to look like that. So as I say all the time, you do not have to spend a lot of money to get a beautiful, beautiful angelfish. So my 55-gallon gourami tank here, we got kind of a lot to talk about. If you haven't been following along with all of my videos lately, I recently built a large sort of hood contraption over the top of it, in which I hung 4 of those LED floodlights shining straight down into the tank. The immediate result was not only gorgeous light, but a ton of algal growth. I had an explosion of algae in this tank, which I was fully expecting, and I fully got. I mean, if you look at the Java moss here, you can see how like clumpy and heavy it looks. That's all algae growing all over the moss. You can see it better on the Java Windelov. It's just covered in algae. Everything has algae growing on it in this tank now. So my solution to that was suggested to me by a viewer, and that was to put a dimmer switch on the tank. So right now we're fully dimmed, and I did a lux test on this, and we're at about 2100 lux at full dim. But if I turn it all the way up, we go up to almost 8,000 lux. We're at about 7,500 lux, 7,800 lux, somewhere in there at full crank. And so that's what it looked like when I put it on there. And that's when I got the huge explosion of algae. So if we're taking it from 7,500 and we're taking it all the way down to roughly 2,100, that should have a big, big, significant reduction in the amount of algal growth, simply because I'm not dumping so much energy in there in the form of all that light. So the tank looks fantastic. It looks just as good with the dimmed lighting. It's still the same beautiful quality of light. It's just not so much of it. And frankly, I think it looks better with the lights dimmed a little bit like this. When it's full crank, I know it does terrible things to my camera. It washes out all the colors and makes some of the fish look just white because you can't even see any details. But even to my eye, standing here in front of it, those lights are so bright that they are almost blinding. They almost take away from the attractiveness of the fish because they're so intense. So turning them down like this really, really makes a big difference, and it looks a lot better, in my opinion. And so far the general zeitgeist I get from my viewers is that everybody else seems to think it looks a lot better with the light turned down a little bit lower than this too. So that is what's going on in my 55-gallon gourami tank. If we move next door to my 55-gallon tank, which is just all I ever call this one anymore, nothing new going on here. I did a big water change about a week ago. I got all that pleco poop up and out of the tank, and there it is again. It builds up in this tank so fast. This is one of those tanks that I've talked about where if you've got a proper healthy balance between the biome in the tank, you know, the biological life in the tank, and the waste products being produced, if you've got a proper balance between those, then you shouldn't see a buildup of fish poop and stuff. That should break down at roughly the same rate it's produced, and in this tank it does not do that, which is a very, very clear indicator that that fish is way too big for this tank. There's just too much bioload in here for it to deal with. I also don't have it scaped out quite as elaborately as my other tanks. I don't have as much plants in here as my other tanks, and all of those factors play into it. I stopped having this piece of wood on the bottom and I started letting it float, simply because it is never going to sink. This end of it, for some reason, is just so buoyant it will not stay down, and every time I do put it down on the bottom, it basically creates, as it sits against the glass, it creates a trap, and as the water flows around the tank this way, you know, in a clockwise formation, with that thing sitting right there, all the water flowing across the front was just funneling all of the poop and all the detritus and everything right into there, and it was just getting wedged up and just created a huge mound of nastiness in there. So last time I got in there and did some work, I vacuumed all that stuff out, and then I just went ahead and removed the rock and let that piece of wood float again. Who knows, maybe someday it'll sink. It's a gorgeous piece of wood, so I'm keeping it in there one way or the other. Other than that, I did see a dead guppy in here a few days ago, and I never got around to getting it out of there, and I don't see the dead guppy anymore, so it either rotted away and is gone, which is not a big deal. A fish that small is not going to give you a real big, like, ammonia spike or anything. Either that or it got eaten by the pleco, which is possible, but unlikely. I think it probably just rotted away. It was a little tiny guppy, so not that big of a deal. Anyway, that's all that's going on in my 55-gallon tank. Again, one of these days we will be getting in here. That is probably going to be my next project, to get that tank sort of revamped and looking a little bit better. So we now move on to my 40 breeder. This tank's doing really well since I got in there and did a little bit of maintenance to it. Well, actually I did a lot of maintenance to it, if you'll remember. I went in there and we removed a ton of the plants that were getting so overgrown. And I put some nearite snails in there, and it's getting better and better and clearer and clearer. You can see how I've got like clumps of the cyanobacteria and stuff growing on the glass there, but other than that, it's mostly clear. That is because of the nearite snails that have been working their magic in there. Look how clear all these rocks are. This rock was going to be a test rock. I left that mostly covered with the, you know, with all that stuff that you see. I don't know, that's probably a mix of cyanobacteria, blackbeard algae, and all kinds of good stuff. But you'll notice that rock is getting very cleared off. And so once again, those nearite snails are in there working their magic. Look at all the clear areas. You can even see I got clear places on the wood. All these rocks back here cleared off. All these pebbles on the bottom have been cleared. So some of that is the two rubber lip plecos I have in here, but some of that is the nearite snails. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's one on the back glass back there right now. And I think I put 5 of them in here. In fact, there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3 of them right there. So the 4th one was on the back glass. And I do not see the 5th one, but some eagle-eyed viewer may have already spotted that 5th one in here somewhere. So little by little, the tank's just sort of getting itself cleaned up. I'm not going to worry too much about it just yet. I'm not ready to start rebuilding this tank yet. I have plans on putting new stock and so on and so forth in here. But with the sort of unexpected arrival of my discus that were given to me as a gift, I certainly wasn't going to turn that down. But between that and getting my gourami tank all fixed up and looking good, I've kind of been preoccupied with other tanks at the moment. So this is definitely going to be on my list of getting some new fish in here and getting it stocked up and all that. So between this tank and this tank, we still have plenty of stuff to do project-wise as time moves on. And speaking of moving on, we are going to move on now to my 125-gallon New World tank, which is starting to get a little more broad than just the New World. We know that we've always had the spotted tilapia in this tank, and she is West African. But other than that, all the rest of the fish in this tank were New World fish, either North or South America. This, of course, here is my bluegill sunfish, looking pretty good. Whenever you look at this one straight on, he is the grumpiest looking fish. But it's a cool one. There's my creek chubs. It's unusual for my viewers to see the tank the way I normally see it, which is all the fish just nice and chilled out, swimming around, doing their thing. There's my little jewel cichlid. He's coming over to see what's up. Thinks maybe he might be getting some food, but it's probably really early in the day, so he's probably wondering why I'm over here talking and not putting food in the tank. Really happy with the addition of the jewel cichlid. That is another African fish that got put in there. And speaking of the devil, there's the last new addition to the fish. It's that shark. And that shark is an Indonesian fish. So again, we're getting a little more broad on the around the world in this tank. I've actually thought about calling this my around the world tank, because I do seem to have fish from all parts of the world in it at this point. But otherwise, still just doing fine, taking over. Haven't done anything with this tank, haven't had any issues. Did a fairly big water change yesterday, getting ready for my, not yesterday, Friday, getting ready for my Friday night live stream. Don't forget I do a live stream every Friday night and Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And while I was in there, I did a big water change. I got the glass all nice and wiped down, and I removed a little bit of the detritus that builds up. Right, in fact, right there you can see a little bit of pleco poop, because I do have a big pleco in this tank. And you can see a little bit of its poop starting to sort of build up right there. So this is one of those tanks that I kind of do a little bit of vacuuming on. I kind of just swirl the stuff up in the water while I'm doing a water change, and it basically drains out all the stuff that's in the water column. I don't necessarily need to vac it. I can just swirl the water around and swirl a lot of it out of there by doing that. I also have several nearite snails in this tank. There's 2 of them right there. But that big pleco is what does the bulk of the work of keeping this tank clean. If you'll notice, this woodwork is so beautiful, and there's no algae growing on it. You can see all that rich, beautiful texture and all that nice wood coloration, all those earth tones in there. That is a result of that big pleco getting in there and scraping and scratching and chewing on that wood all the time. That, by the way, is probably my favorite piece of wood I've got in any of my aquariums. It's really a significant piece of wood. It goes all the way up and out, all the way up to almost the ceiling. And then not these pieces here, but this piece is the continuation of it. These are actually separate tree roots, branches that I've just laid across the top of it, and it just gives a different sort of feel to an open top tank when you look at it, when it's got, you know, branches and stuff across the top of it. So that is my 125 gallon New World tank. This is my snail breeding tank. And the only thing we need to talk about with this tank is the fact that I really need to get in there and trim my filter. This is actually, I long ago stopped putting filter pads in here, and I just let the water flow through all this Java moss that grows on everything. And the Java moss acts as the filter. So once in a while, instead of changing my filter, I actually have to get in there and trim it, remove a bunch of that Java moss and let it start growing back. So moving on to my native tank. I saw the crayfish in there again yesterday. We saw it on the live stream Friday night. I actually was able to get a little bit of look at the crayfish crawling around in there on Friday, so we all know it's still alive. I didn't do a water change, but I did top off the water pretty significantly, and I wiped the glass down so we can actually see into the tank and see the fish a little bit. This tank's starting to get on my nerves a little. The pump in the back that pumps the water up through this hose that then gives us this, you know, water flow over top of the log and everything, it gets clogged up every single day. I have to get in here and mess around with that pump in the back. And it's just kind of starting to get old. I'm almost thinking about just slapping a hang on the back filter on it or something, or maybe repositioning the pump somewhere where it's easier to access. I put it way in the back behind everything, so I can't really see it, and you just get the actual, you know, natural look of the tank without having all of that, you know, pump and hose and everything on full display. But it's hard to get to. I put it in a place that's hard to see, but it's also hard to reach. The wood's looking good though. I'm getting all this nice good growth. All that's that Java moss that I threw in there. I'm getting just regular algae and cyanobacteria. You can see that dark green, that's all just cyanobacteria. But again, to me, that looks absolutely perfectly natural and normal. I would see that growing on rocks out in the stream. Cyanobacteria is not some, malady that's exclusive to our fish tanks. Cyanobacteria is everywhere. It grows in your yard, it grows in your dirt, it grows everywhere. And so seeing it on something like that does not bother me in the least. You'll notice that the tank's not all covered in it. I don't have, algae growing all over everything. So as long as it's a balance, as long as it looks natural and isn't bothering me, that cyanobacteria didn't bother me at all. Looks awesome, I think. So that is my 40-gallon native tank. It's got, well, technically, I guess you could call them native fish. It's got the gambusia that I caught myself, and then because I have population control issues with my red-wag platies, I threw a bunch of red-wag platies in this tank too. In fact, I'm probably going to be throwing a bunch more red-wag platies in this tank because I'm having population control issues again in my office tank. But more on that later. So let's move on to probably my favorite tank, and this is my 125-gallon tank. And we will come back here so we can get more of a full view of the whole thing. And I also, as you can see, built one of those big hood-like contraptions over top of this tank, so likewise I could hang the LED spotlights shining straight down into the tank. This tank likewise was so bright. I had so much light in this tank that I was expecting an algal explosion in this tank, but it didn't have enough time to really take off. I was starting to get some really vigorous growth with the cyanobacteria in this tank. I have a lot of it that tends to grow in the moss and everything, and the fern rather, up here. And with it being directly under that light, it was just cranking up the growth rate on that cyanobacteria. And so I was able to get in here, and I installed one of those dimmer switches on this one too. So it just basically has a little wheel. You dial it up or down, and this again is on full dim. And if we go the other way, we can go all the way up to full brightness, and you can see it sort of alarms the fish a little bit. They don't know why the sun just came out all of a sudden. But again, when I turn it down, we go from not being able to see because of all the bright glare and, the colors are washing out. These are the worst. These are my female albino millennium rainbow fish, and they're a bright yellowy orange color. And when that light's turned up really high, they just wash out. They just look white. They glow almost, and you're kind of getting that effect still a little bit. If you look at their underside, you get a little bit more of that sort of orangey yellow coloration. The males, of course, are just vibrant orange. That's insanely vibrant orange. It looks amazing. And I'm not a big fan of albino fish, but those are just incredible. The rainbow fish you can see back there, that's sort of black and orange, is a Marcy rainbow fish. That's a hybrid. It's a cross between a Parkinson's and something else. I don't know what the cross is. It's a Parkinson's and something else. So if you're interested in those Marcy rainbow fish, look up a Parkinson's. They look almost exactly the same. So of course we've also got my big angelfish in here. I mentioned earlier that I had two of them. That is the other one. That is just a PetSmart $5 or $6 angelfish, whatever you pay for them at PetSmart. And you can see likewise that is an absolutely amazing looking angelfish. So Friday, when I was prepping for my live stream, I got in here, I did a bunch of work on this tank too. Well, I say a bunch of work. I did a big water change, and I wiped all the front glass down. I vacuumed a bunch of mulm and stuff out of here and got the tank looking nice and spiffy for my Friday night live stream. And now I'm quite happy with the way it looks. I think I might add another power head to this tank. If you'll notice here, this is where the power head flows in, and I have it basically spraying across the surface, and that gives me those ripples, and those ripples give me that shimmer. And that, to me, is magic. That shimmer just looks like natural sunlight shining down through water. And when the fish get down on this end of the tank, that was good timing. When the fish get down at the end of this tank, just seeing that shimmer and glisten over them is amazing. Even my snakeskin gourami that's not particularly colorful, and my Tenopoma, which is absolutely not colorful. Again, on cue, awesome. Look at that. Doesn't that just look amazing, the way that light is just twinkling over him? And so I can get that effect anywhere I want it, as long as I have a little bit of surface agitation. And if you'll notice at this end of the tank, I do not have surface agitation. So a small power head placed on the end of the tank, hey everybody, it's me, like so, and then angled upwards, gives me all of that surface agitation, which in turn gives me all that twinkly, sparkly water below it. So I may do something similar to that. I may simply get a small power head and put that at this end of the tank, angled sort of upwards, to do nothing more than just disturb that water right there and have it not be so still. And then I will get all of that beautiful, shimmery, glistening look that looks so amazing on these fish when they swim under this end of the tank. Hoping that male rainbow fish will come down this way at Marcy. Well, you still get a little bit of an idea of how that shimmer and glisten looks. So needless to say, this tank is doing really well. Those discus in there look amazing. Again, they were a gift to me from one of my viewers. Can't thank them enough, although I'm sure I have by now. And I'm just really, really happy with the way this tank looks. I'm really excited about that Java fern too. I'm waiting to see it grow up and out of the water now that I've taken the top off the tank. I'll show you what the inside of one of these contraptions look like. It's just basically a big hood so that the fish can't jump out. That's really the only purpose that serves, because if you'll notice, I've got lights hanging in the same sort of fashion over the tank down there, but it's just an open top tank. This tank has rainbow fish in it, and I'm afraid they would jump. And likewise with my gourami tank. Gouramis are prone to jump out of open top tanks too, and so this big hood-like contraption is simply there to catch the fish and drop them back in the tank if they ever do jump. It also gives me a way to hang those LEDs high above the tank so that the light blends evenly and I don't have those weird sort of columns. You know, if the lights are too close to the surface, you get these columns of light. And by raising it up like that, all the light blends out evenly enough that we don't see those individual positioning of each individual light over the tank. It's just all nice and homogeneous, and everything's all just nice and evenly lit. So that's the benefit of hanging the lights a little bit higher over the water. And then of course, this also reduces the light pollution. I don't get glare all over everything like I do with my other tank. Really, really happy with that idea of putting that big hood over top of these two tanks. And we are, in fact, going to do it over that tank next when we start working on my 55 tank. That'll be the next tank that gets this big hood-like contraption over it. Moving on to my 20... standard, my deep sand bed tank here. Couldn't think of what I called this tank for a moment. Everything in this tank is doing well. Did a big water change on it yesterday. I wiped the front glass down so we could see it on my live stream on Friday night. I keep saying yesterday, I mean Friday. I keep forgetting today's Sunday. I think it's Saturday. Friday I did a big water change, got the glass all wiped down, and I vacked a bunch of the mulm and everything off of the surface. I don't scrunch down into the soil or into the gravel and substrate. I am trying to get a deep sand bed established, and we're going to see if that actually ever amounts to anything. So far it's been probably almost a year, and I'm not seeing any difference whatsoever as far as like denitrification or anything like that. But I don't know, whatever, we're going to leave it alone for a little while and see what happens. I'm not going to go in there and remove substrate from this tank. So this tank is going to be sort of permanently set up as a deep sand bed. And if we ever do start getting any kind of denitrification or something like that, this tank will be the one we do it in. My experimental tank that I've been working on for almost 7 months now is another story. We're going to be shooting a video on that pretty soon, so make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss that. I'm going to sort of wrap up all my thoughts on my whole experiment with that deep sand bed tank after another week or two. We're going to let it have a full solid 7 months of trying to establish, and we're going to see what happens after 7 months worth of establishment. So anyway, that's a different tank, different topic. in a different video. As far as my 20 here goes, everything looks great. Tank looks awesome. I'm really happy with the way that piece of woodwork looks. The rams are doing amazing in there. And just all in all, I'm really happy with the way this tank has been turning out. It looks like I'm getting a little bit of biofilm starting to build up on the surface there. I might want to do a little surface skim next time I do a water change in there. My quarantine tank now has new inhabitants. I've got 5 black skirt tetras, and I put 2 new snails in there, and I do not see either one of them at the moment. I put a rabbit snail in there, and I put a black spike snail in there, and again, I do not see either one of them at the moment. Yes, I do. I can kind of make out, I don't even know if you can see it on the camera or not, but somewhere in that back corner area, I can see the head of the rabbit snail up against the glass. Where the black spike snail is, I do not know. It's probably behind these rocks. But anyway, these 2 snails are going to go in my 125 we were just looking at with the discus. I think they'll make neat additions to that tank, and they will certainly help clean the algae up. And then the 5 black skirt tetras are going to go upstairs into my office tank, which is where I'm having all of my red wag platy population explosion. And so these skirt tetras are going to basically serve as population control for my red wag platies. So moving on to my brackish tank. This tank is looking rough. I really need to get in there and keep doing work on it. I've started doing some cyanobacteria treatments. I've done 2 treatments and a water change, and it almost looks like all I'm accomplishing is making the cyanobacteria angry, because it looks like it's coming back with a vengeance. Let me get this light turned on. It looks like it's coming back with a vengeance. You can see how red all that nasty stuff on the walls are. When it's dying off, when you're doing the ChemiClean treatment or the Ultralife, whichever you prefer, and that stuff starts to die off, it gets more of a brown sort of look. It almost looks like the diatoms. You can see around there some of that stuff is already dead, but a lot of that is still living. I've gotten a lot of it off the bottom of the tank, but it's already starting to grow back, and you can see it's starting to grow back on the glass again. I always struggle with the cyanobacteria in this tank. In fact, you can see these like strands of stuff hanging through the water. That is cyanobacteria. It's coming off of the spray bar, and it's almost blowing it out the same way you can, like, if you've ever seen cotton candy, or if you're across the pond you call it candy floss, if you've ever seen that stuff made, the way the sugar sort of spins out of the thing, that's almost like the way this is growing. It's being blown out by this spray bar, but it's still increasing in length, and it's still growing its cultural colonies, and it winds up developing into these like strings of cyanobacteria. It's really weird. But again, this tank just looks like crap right now. I really need to get in there and keep doing, either stay on top of these treatments or something. I'll do a couple treatments, and then like a week goes by and I kind of forget about it, and I really need to be in there, every other day doing a water change and a treatment, a water change and a treatment, every 48 hours or so. And I just have not been doing that. Otherwise, the tank's doing okay. I've done some water changes on it and everything. And again, recently I've been doing the work in there. It's just that once you start, you kind of got to keep going. If you wound it, if you beat it back a little bit and then let it go, you'll just get a huge explosion again. I'm not sure why. Again, it's almost like you make it angry and then it comes back with a vengeance. I'm trying to give you a look at Butterbean above the smudge line there. So he's still doing pretty well, and I think I've pretty much decided that the sweet spot for where these fish like to be is just below Brackish, about 1.002. If I go below that, he seems really irritated and uncomfortable. He swims around the tank, does a lot of glass surfing. If I bring the salinity up just a little bit, and I bring it up to around 1.002, he calms down immediately and just starts chilling out and being a normal fish. See, and again, this is what I'm used to seeing. I see him just kind of hanging out, doing his thing. Normally when I'm shooting videos of fish, I'm either got the fish all disrupted because I'm standing right in front of them talking real loud, or I'm feeding them while I'm doing it, or we're doing a water change. It's not very often you, the viewer, get to see my fish just chilling out and being relaxed and hanging out. But there you go. That's what Butterbean does most of his day. He just cruises around, hangs out, watches me as I walk around the room, and so on and so forth. And that brings us all the way back more or less to where we started at my 29 miscellaneous. So I'm going to say thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget I do my live streams every Friday night and Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I do a members only live stream on Wednesday night. So if you're still watching this video, that might indicate that you enjoy my videos. If so, you might want to sign up for membership and you'll get access to that members only live stream on Wednesday. Plus I do post little odd videos here and there for my members only, sneak peeks and stuff that I haven't shown the public yet, that sort of thing. So there's a few little perks to membership if you're interested in signing up for that. Plus it always helps to support me. So thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe, ring that bell, and I will see you real soon on the next one.